Hello, my lovelies! I'm Ginny O, the author with no last name. And today I'm taking off most of my hats and I'm going to get a little personal. And it might be just as personal and vulnerable for you as it is for me. So I have seen a lot of comments and talk drifting around things like shitty game companies and bad games, young adult books, shipping, Star Wars, and so on and so forth, where people who are not into these things are very confused about why people care so much for things in their opinion that don't really matter. And then one argument that got thrown into my face was, you can't change it, so you shouldn't get so emotional about it. It's right up there with, be grateful or go away. You don't get to dictate my emotions. Thanks. There is a scale for this on things that are acceptable in our society to be into, like sports and politics, and things that aren't acceptable, ranging from comics, young adult books, and RPF, aka real person fandom. The scale of acceptability changes over time. At one point in the 90s and early 2000s, it wasn't acceptable to like anime. In the mid-2010s to late 2010s, it wasn't acceptable to like Korean boy bands. And it doesn't seem to matter, liking young adult fiction written for teen girls seems to be unacceptable no matter what, or liking romance novels. That seems to be something hardcore that has stuck since before young adult even really existed, and Mercedes Lackey and Anne McCaffrey were writing romantic fantasy. This is all tiring to me. It tries to give me a headache, but the question comes up over and over about how can they defend something that's so toxic, bad, shitty? Put in an adjective with negative connotations, and I have probably seen it. I'm not here to pick on anyone or judge anybody, because I have been there in the fandom trenches, seeing little things which do not a romantic relationship make in shows and books, writing way too much fanfiction about said non-existent romantic relationship in canon, and squeeing happily when new stuff from my favorite comes out, to which I spent way too much money. I am not immune. Right knights, destructive defenders, and stands. I have been accused of being a white knight, which is amusing to me, because white knights are people who come into spaces where other fans are critical of media, and they will defend that media to the death. To the white knight, the media can do no wrong. I am a very critical person. I can't think of anything right now that I would defend with my last breath. A white knight doesn't indicate a fan trying to save a franchise from itself. Creators who are trying to save franchises, we aren't knights. We are wolves. We care more about our fellow gamers who may not give a shit about us than the corporations behind our beloved media we wish would do so much better. Destructive defenders is a term I coined in my first How Not to Make an MMO video. A destructive defender is someone who looks and acts and talks like they are critical of the company out of one side of their mouth. And then if anyone else comes in and is critical of the company in a way this person doesn't like, they will change their tune to defend the company, attack the other critical person, create drama to drive them out, and try to curry favor with the company. This person, at first glance, can be hard to distinguish from a quote-unquote wolf. I consider them destructive because not only do they rip fandoms apart into us versus them, they might have information the company could use. It's ruined by their continual praise of said company, which is not helpful because it doesn't give the company incentive to improve. Being critical of a company and then not removing praise in your money does nothing. I will probably have to do a video about constructive versus destructive criticism later because it's opposite of what everyone thinks. And then you have stans. And this term was coined around the time Eminem wrote a song about an obsessed fan he named Stan. The type of fan has been around a lot longer than the term stan has. These fans are completely obsessed with a particular fandom or part of fandom. It has to be their way. They have to see people just like them in that fandom, and by just like them, I do mean most of these stans are cishet white males. There is definitely part of stan culture that runs into neckbeard or quote-unquote men's rights culture, where they think any type of diversity at all, from race to sexuality to disabilities, unless they're cool and can have cool cyborg arms, to neurodivergence is woke, and companies who include diversity should be called out, and a lot of times they miss what they are calling out has always been woke. Marvel, G.I. Joe, Sesame Street, Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, and those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. The stans do have a huge us versus them mentality. There are some stans that create a parasocial relationship with the celeb or piece of media or character that only exists in their own mind, and when the celeb or media or character does something they feel they shouldn't do, the stan becomes betrayed and may or may not act out to devastating results. See the song, Stan. There can be a huge sense of entitlement around stans. They feel they are owed or deserve something even though they are merely consumers of a product created to make money. Arguments with a stan tend to devolve into straw men, whataboutisms, and gaslighting, which is saying your emotions are wrong and are not as important as the stan's emotions. The right-wing stans think the left wing is this huge monolith out to get them and to destroy their favorite things, which is not true. The left is a bunch of little groups out there wanting to see more of their favorite things with people that look like them. Makes sense, right? Women want to see more women, POC want to see more POC, LGBTQIA+ want to see more like them, disabled people want more disabled people, neurodivergent people want to see more neurodivergent people, and they want to see themselves in stories doing the things while being a minority, and not necessarily a story about being a minority. It makes sense we want to see more than a dominant white bread men in our media. Adding conspiracy theories, trolls, and you have today's modern internet. I have said before, and I'm going to repeat it, the internet is not a good place for nuanced conversation. The internet and the way the algorithms are set up for engagement, it encourages this us versus them, conspiracy theory, trolling type, villain of the day, toxic interactions. Even on YouTube, where you can go back and hear what I say repeatedly, you still have to take the time to listen. And that's how I and other creators end up with comments where the issues have actually been addressed in the video, but it's clear while they might have heard, they didn't listen, which is incredibly frustrating sometimes. So, what is going on? What is happening? Why does this happen? And why, Ginny, do you think you can address it? Okay, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I am an author and a fashion designer. You may have questions as to what does writing and fashion design have to do with psychology? Quite a bit, actually. At my first university, where I went for fashion design, we had an entire class about the social psychology of clothing. Why do people wear clothes? How do trends and creative thought work? And what is this language of clothes? What are these niche groups and colors and styles when worn together saying? I'm an analytical person. It was fascinating. If you've watched The Devil Wears Prada, which given how much Chanel and not Prada was in the movie, wrong name, you might remember the infamous cerulean scene. Miranda engages in with Andy over her bargain bin acrylic bright blue sweater. Miranda talks about how Oscar de la Renta did a collection of cerulean gowns and how the color worked its way through other designers down to the bargain bins. This is the trickle-down theory of fashion design. It's a little more complicated than that because there are trend forecasting companies that do give out information for 2 years in advance about style and color trends. There's more than one magazine. It's expensive out of the wazoo. And in the scene itself, everyone in the office, but Andy, is wearing warm earthen type tones, and Andy is wearing a cold blue sweater. which in color sets her apart from them and makes her disconnected and not part of the group. It's a brilliant scene because it addresses psychology, both in the way fashion works and the way you perceive what is going on through color theory and psychology alone. Right up there with florals. For spring, groundbreaking. I felt that a lot in school. There is a psychology to it, and when I had a teacher who went, it all goes back to textiles, eventually you figure out in most ways she wasn't wrong. History is messy and ugly, and textiles and clothes played a big role in the messiness and yes, ugliness of different time periods from sumptuary laws to colonization to the American Civil War. And as a writer, I have to view characters as literary tools. Very little of what I do characterize is decided purely on emotion. A writer who gets analytical about their work sits and they don't create a character. They create a character arc, or the character has a goal, a motivation, and there is something personal going on with this character to give them emotional/physical skin in the game of the story. A more modern type of storytelling is one that balances the interpersonal stakes of the character with the outside plot forces the character is acting upon or being acted upon as they are out of their control. If I'm not clicking with a character right away, I'll start digging into astrology and personality types and, writing them more to get a feel for their voice. It's understanding why people do what they do. Psychology. And in my own personal life, I have had to really dig into this for my own mental and emotional health. What do healthy relationships look like? What types of behaviors indicate red flags of establish boundaries, that? And it took time and work and stumbling across a book called Buried Alive, Never Die, about emotions and how they can affect us negatively and positively. One of the biggest and most important things I learned is our brains don't like being wrong. If we are confronted with a conflicting idea or new piece of information that seemingly contradicts previous information and we perceive this as wrong, it actually physically hurts our brain. And if there's something humans do not like, it's pain. Pain has always been the signal to our body to stop what we are doing. If you are in pain, please stop what you are doing that puts you in pain. Your body is trying to tell you something's wrong. This is why people have a hard time with the concepts of science. Science is constantly testing and retesting theories and finding new information. It's not that science is wrong, it's science has discovered something new and now we must adapt to this new situation, and oh my god, that hurts! That's hard! We don't like it! Kudos to scientists who have to train their brains to get to the bottom of things and get past that hurt to go, I'm not wrong, this is just something new. Let's test again to see if we're onto something. And when we get information or an idea that jives with our brain releases feel-good chemicals that makes us happy. Our brains like the feel-good chemicals. And so it encourages us to do the things and listen to the ideas that make us feel good. And when people say, hey, what makes you feel good is actually not a good thing, we get defensive and lash out instead of taking in the new information, researching it for ourselves, and adjusting our thinking. No, we are in pain, so we must defend ourselves to keep people from putting us in pain more. When we are younger, it is much easier, supposedly, to take in new information and adapt to it. But we cry a lot. Something new happens, and we cry. It's just the way it is when you're a kid. It's scary when something new happens. But then we figure out this new scary thing isn't actually bad, and we get used to it. As we get older, supposedly our brains become less flexible, and we are less and less open to new information and new ways of doing things. It hurts too much. The only inevitable thing is change, and change is the things we humans like the least. Our brains, with these feel-good chemicals, like to form patterns of thought and behavior that will create more feel-good chemicals. The more you do something, the easier and easier it becomes to do, and the more difficult and harder and painful it is to break out of that pattern of thought and behavior. Now, in some cases, this will be aggravated by your body not producing the right amount of chemicals, or your brain being configured differently than other people's brains, or you don't absorb the feel-good chemicals in the same way other people do. The whole brain thing is very complex and way above my pay grade. Our brains like to categorize things. We like to put things into boxes and lists and groups. We're trained to do this when we're young. Sort things by color, sort things by number. Here are the different shapes. What shapes go together? As we get older and are exposed to different things, this starts being applied to animals, to people, to religion, to media. I can only praise the universe, or God if that pleases you, that my parents let me go to my grandparents, who were in their 80s, and had 3 TV stations, one of which was PBS. So I got to watch Sesame Street. I got to see Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Reading Rainbow, watch Bob Ross, The Lawrence Welk Show. And these things would have been considered in these days quite woke. I grew up in a town with no people of color. There are members of my family my dad shielded me from until I was older because they aren't nice people. There were 3 people of color in my high school. I think when my nephew was in school, I counted 3 in his middle school, and he was one of them. Before I went to the big city uni in San Francisco, I went to a smaller private university in Ohio. And it was a good middle step because it introduced me to more people of color who before that I mostly saw on TV. But at least the TV I watched was where they were treated like people versus being typecast as thugs and gangsters. If I had gone from small white rural America to San Francisco without that step, the culture shock would have been much, much bigger. We take things and we categorize them based on the emotions we have with our experiences with certain things and based on what we've been told by people who we trust, which can be parents, teachers, pastors, and people in the media like Mr. Rogers or LeVar Burton. Bad experiences with certain animals can lead to fear of them, so then we don't like those animals and we must work hard to overcome those fears if they are rational fears. For me, this was dogs. Dogs love me. I do not love dogs. I have worked hard to like dogs. I do not love them. Please train your furry babies to not jump on people or bite. Thanks. Media is something designed to give us emotions. Good media, good art, good music. It is supposed to invoke an emotional response, good or bad. Horror is supposed to give us this feeling of vague discomfort to outright fear. Romance, when the question of why can't they be together now is answered, is supposed to make us feel happy for that happily ever after ending. Action is supposed to make us feel tense and on the edge of our seats. So our brains latch onto types of media we enjoy the feelings about. If you enjoy feeling vaguely uncomfortable watching horror, then that's valid. The Mummy is about as close as I get. Pitch Black. I do enjoy a good paranormal true crime type story, but horror most times is not my cup. It will go down to even liking certain character personalities and dynamics, and we humans are very creative people, even if we don't think we are. We still make up stories in our heads or have expectations of how characters should act and get together based upon our emotions. And if you're a professional, how well the story was plotted out in your professional opinion. And when things do not go according to the way we think they should, or do not play out to our emotions, then it hurts our brain. We get defensive. We lash out. We find people who think and feel like we do in order to get validation for these thoughts and feelings. We want to be comforted in the idea we are right. We form groups, and the tribalism starts. We are right. Other people who do not think like we do, they are wrong. They are the enemy. It is perfectly and morally justified to attack the enemy we perceive as wrong in any way we think in order to quiet them and make them go away. There are people who get emotional feel-good chemicals from stirring up and amplifying shit. These are the trolls. In some cases, the media, the piece of art, or the sports team becomes part of the person's identity. They resonate with this thing. They are a Marvel fangirl, forever at war with those who love DC. They are a Warzy or a Warhead. They're a Trekkie. They love Twilight. I think that was Twihard. Or maybe they're a Potterhead. Or they ship this certain pairing. Take Jean-Luc, the Harmonians versus the Drurys, and the Ron-Hermione shippers. Or those who shipped Katara and Zuko versus those who shipped Katara and Aang. Or they support a company no matter what it does. Blizzard, Star Stable Entertainment, Square Enix. And they will defend that media, pairing, or company until they are blue in the face. Or we can go to the extremes of Fictionkin, Otherkin, and the Snapewives. Those who think they are a fictional character in a parallel universe, or they are spiritually animals, or they are married to Snape. This is how cults form around fandoms. I mean, actual cults, not cult in the underground paper media meaning. Look up the Final Fantasy cult. It's a doozy. People who are outside the tribes do not understand the mentality behind the fandom tribes. They probably have their own tribes, be it Black Lives Matter, or LGBTQIA+ rights, or politics, or sports, or there is something they have that's part of their identity they feel passionate about. And they don't equate it with defending a piece of media or shipping a set of characters, because what they care about is far more important than, how Luke was character assassinated in Star Wars sequels, or Reylo being good or bad depending on your stance, or Rey being a Mary Sue, or how Finn was neglected as a main character. I mean, the Force Awakens people versus the Last Jedi people is the original trilogy versus the prequels all over again. In the expanded universe, people are just pissed at Disney for throwing out the original EU because, hey, they might have bought the rights to the Star Wars, but they don't want to pay the original creators like Timothy Zahn and Orson Scott Card, or those who wrote the comics for Marvel, even though they are bastardizing the ideas in those books and comics. So we're getting more dirty bathwater than actual baby. Yes, I am a tad salty, but not so much I'm personally offended over it. I emotionally divorced myself from the EU with the new Jedi Order. Star Wars EU ended for me with the Zahn duology, where Luke and Mara Jade finally get their heads out of their arses, mostly Luke, and got together. Making a piece of media part of your identity is a huge amount of weight to put on something that was made by a human other than yourself. At some point, invariably, the piece of media someone puts out so much stock in to say, it had a big impact on who I am, it's part of me, I own part of this, is going to let them down one way or another. It might be translated into a new medium, it might get a sequel or a prequel, and the minds behind the creativity of the original piece of work may or may not be involved, and without fail, for someone who has made it part of their identity, they're going to mess it up somehow in the mind of the person who has made it part of who they are. Then the person is going to be hurt. The creators don't care. The creators are actually what the person thought the creators were. I wanted this thing, and it was created to cater to me, and me alone, to add more to my identity, and therefore I don't like it, so it's wrong, and I am in pain. So they lash out often at the creators, because social media, especially places like Twitter and Tumblr and YouTube, have ripped away this barrier between fans and creators, and what once took a letter or an email that had to go through an intern or a secretary now can be said to the creator's face, so to speak. And then the creator gets defensive, they are being told they were wrong to do the thing with their own work, and they double down and lash out back. creators didn't intend for anyone to take their work and make it so much of themselves that it becomes a personal if the creator doesn't do what the person consuming the media wants. It becomes a sense of entitlement that the creator owes the fan of the work exactly what the fans want and only what the fans want, even if it goes against the creator's vision. What a burden on both the creator and the consumer. Oof. No one is owed this. No one deserves this. If this was the case, no creator would share their work, ever. Creators are making a piece of entertainment to tell a story they want to tell. If it resonates and invokes emotion, good. If not, then you move on from it. And if the consumer of media does make it part of their identity, they are still not owed anything from the creator. And if they want a piece of media to go a certain way, there is fanfiction. There is AO3. There you can find groups of people just like you who love the thing and want to see 101 different variations of it. You just can't make money off of it because you don't own the IP. And it's not like the original piece of media isn't still there. It's still there and capable of being enjoyed. The adaptation or sequel of the media can be separated and compartmentalized from the rest of it, and the original piece of fiction can still be part of their identity. The original piece of media isn't ruined because of new stuff. Just toss the new stuff out. Don't give it control of you and take up mental headspace. I'm saying they and them here mostly because the closest I've come to this is Star Wars, and my Star Wars, and like I said, my Star Wars ends with the Thrawn duology. Being part of the original Star Wars EU really did teach me to pick and choose my battles and my authors, I guess. People who got mad at Luke running away in the sequel trilogy, and I went, well, Luke was a waffly idiot for 30 years in the EU and kept making everything worse when he showed up until Mara smacked him upside the head. Let Leia do things. She's more effective. Seriously, in the TLJ when Luke was saying these things, I inwardly laughed because someone needed to go say those things to Luke in the original EU. And then give him barbaric hot cocoa and go, there, emo kid. You'll get it next time. This identification and whole tribalism mentality can even go as far as, say, in an MMO or a fighting game where you can create a character, and that character represents you in this digital world. And if you can't make a duplicate of yourself, whether in looks or sex or sound, it creates a jarring identity disassociation. This is where I have to go from group language to not group language, because I have personally never felt this. And you're going, because you can make yourself in most video games easily. No. No. Because I have never identified with a character, or even a blank character, that muchly. My brain does not work like that. I am a writer. I actually enjoy acting. I want to play a role, and then I want to put that role down and walk away from it. And I have never identified hard with female or with male. I don't identify non-binary. I still rather be female than male. My gender has never been this core part of who I am. I don't want kids. I have interests stereotyped as male, which is stupid to gender interests personally. I mean, the closest I come to any type of genderized identity is I am a daddy's girl, or I am the mom friend. My dad just happens to be a mechanical engineer. It is perfectly reasonable for women to want to live in a world of logic and numbers just as much as men. I don't think three-dimensionally the way he does. I see in line. I don't know how he sees. But taking a blueprint or a pattern and making it 3D is a learned visual skill. Sculpting, a little bit beyond me conceptually. Part of it, I'm sure, is a lack of education on it, but part of it is I just don't think that way. Give me fabric and a sewing machine, or yarn and a knitting machine, and maybe I can come up with something durable and functional that's also art. Please don't ask me to sculpt a human body or something I swear sculptors see it in shape. Nurture, or the lack of thereof, plays a huge role in how emotions are expressed, especially how we express anger and such. On the internet, where we don't have to see the other person's face and we can dehumanize them into an object without their own emotions or feelings, it's easy to express our anger in an unhealthy way. And once lashing out feels good and we do it repeatedly, it becomes a pattern of behavior, and patterns are hard to break. There becomes this danger of not being able to separate yourself from something outside of yourself that you technically didn't create. You are projecting yourself onto this avatar in the game. Or you're projecting yourself into this universe or into an actual character. You think you are that character or married to that character in a parallel world and get offended when the actual creator of that character or corporate owner does something you don't agree with that character or franchise or whatever. See again the hate campaigns about Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogy. There is a major difference between a professional author sitting down and analyzing the story arc of, say, Star Wars and why it didn't work using character arcs, conflicts, and story beats, versus a fan who is relying on their emotions to go, I didn't like it and therefore it must be wrong. There is a dangerous line between I'm playing a character in the game and I am this character in the game. One is emotionally and mentally healthy, and the other is not. And I usually get very worried and want to sit with this person and go, are you okay? Do you need someone to talk to? Because that indicates a need for escapism so badly, there must be something going on that needs to be addressed. Depending on what it is, not fixed, addressed. It's not the game or the piece of media. There's something going on in the fan's head that needs to be lovingly addressed by someone who is preferably a professional. And I'm not talking about the proper pronouns in games. There is a representation issue, and then there is I identify as my character issue. I am talking the second, not the first. Because representation is a tricky matter, especially in the game industry, where the loud minority who are going, we don't want woke things, leave politics out of games. Well, not sorry, your games have been woke a long time. Maybe you ought to replay Final Fantasy VII and absorb the anti-capitalism messages again. Just a thought. People want to see themselves doing the fun things in games, and sometimes they may want to see versions of themselves that you know are modified or what abled people might consider fixed, especially if, say, it is someone disabled. No, disabled people aren't broken. They do not need to be fixed. Helped? Yes. Fixed? No. Ugh. This whole representation thing becomes a verbal minefield for creators to even talk about, just tiptoeing through the minds of wordage. There are brains who are wired not to see the difference between fiction and reality. There are brains out there like that. And those brains are valid. You know, they do have to be more open and careful about making moral judgments about other people, because there are brains who compartmentalize fiction and reality quite well. When philosophers say, know thyself, this is part of it. There is no real, normal, typical brain. There is how your brain functions and how you see, shape, color, line, and how much of imagination you have when you close your eyes, photorealistic to black, and how much separation you can put between fiction and reality, none to compartmentalizing, and your emotions, the same way, and how hard your brain is going to latch onto addictions and tribalisms. Reading and writing can be an addiction. They are mine of choice, personally, mostly because gambling is boring and alcohol and cigarettes give me headaches. I'll stick to books and words. Thanks. I want to say the hardest lesson to learn is you can be wrong. Unfortunately, when I was young, I was told I was wrong quite a bit. So while I still don't like being wrong or challenged because it hurts and is painful, it is on me to do the research and become my best self and come to my own conclusions outside of an echo chamber. My experience has been such. I don't like talking about things unless I know I have done my research and have come to a conclusion based upon more than just my feelings. So if this is a hard lesson, it's going to depend on how much you've been told you're wrong in your life and how you've been told you're wrong. It is possible to be told you're wrong in a nurturing and loving way. More people need to learn it. It's great to have feelings about things. I have feelings about Ratchet and Clank and Angela Cross coming back. I have feelings about Sly Cooper and how if we want little raccoons, Carmelita isn't going to work out. On top of the fact she and Sly, as of Thieves of Time, are not good for each other anymore. I have feelings about Draco and Hermione both learning shit about each other's cultures and going to nerd out happily in big libraries and have lots of terrifyingly smart children. Because it's called character growth. I have feelings about The Mandalorian and Cara Dune, and if you're going to make an entry point series a person not into Star Wars can enjoy, maybe you shouldn't drag all your other series into it, unless you're going to deal with all the stuff you've left hanging within The Mandalorian itself. Just a thought. But that is honestly the Star Wars lover and the writer in me converging to roll my eyes. Personally, my tribes are human and writer. I get angry when humans prey on other humans, monetarily or otherwise. Murder and stealing bad, folks. It's a lot easier for me to get angry for other people than it is to be angry about my own circumstances. I get more offended over bad writing than about specific fandoms anymore, because I've not made a specific fandom a core of my identity since I burnt out of one being a very small, big name fan in a very small fandom. You, my viewers, might associate me with the Star Stable fandom, and I'm just mad at bad writing and bad corporate culture preying on children. If Star Stable fails, well, I'm working on Mystic Riders, which is a lot more important to me than Star Stable. I can't save Star Stable. Star Stable has to save itself. So the next time you see someone defending a company, or a pairing, or a book, or movie you can't see as defensible, and you don't know why they do it, realize it's not that they're young, or haven't experienced the world. It's they've made it part of their identity. And when it's part of their identity, someone saying it's wrong hurts. They lash out. They feel good to defend this thing they love so much, becoming a white knight, destructive defender, or a stan. And you probably do it too for the things you love and are passionate about. Maybe you love and are passionate about being constructively critical of a piece of media due to lack of representation or poor writing or whatever. There might be a lot of people out there being positive about that media. They, the right knights, destructive defenders, and stans, just see the negative in their minds outweighing the positive. It's easier to remember the negative things over positive things. And that's an entirely different part of brain wiring, which really, really sucks. The same for the amount of women and POC in a room versus white males, which would be two other videos, honestly. Thanks for coming, and I hope this helped explain why people do what they do. Maybe it will encourage you to extend a little empathy towards them. I do my best, but I will not engage in personal attacks against myself or others. Take care of yourselves, bless, stay safe, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.